The only other time the Fed got that right, where they played the role of Pierpont Morgan in a subsequent event, was the rescue that I negotiated. That was the bailout of long-term capital management in 1998. Now, that was a financial panic. It was not a recession. There was no recession in 1998, actually. And then the stock market, then we flew right into the dot-com bubble in 2000. The stock market did just fine after that. But we were very close to literally shutting every securities market in the world. That's what would have happened if we had not pulled off that rescue. But our model in 1998 was the panic of 1907. So when there was no Fed, and everyone thinks the Fed bailed out long-term capital, not true. Wall Street bailed it out. Wall Street got together, the 14 families, as I call them, and cobbled together a $4 billion rescue package, all cash in 72 hours. Tried doing that on short notice, but we did. But that was based on what happened in 1907. So 1907, let's go back to the 1860s and Walter Bagehot, English journalist and expert on monetary economics, believe it or not. And he was the first one to define the role of the lender of last resort. Now, bear in mind, there was no central bank in the United States at that time. From 1835 to 1913, we did not have a central bank. The Fed was created in 1913. So in the panic of 1907, there was no central bank. But Bagehot said the lender of last resort, whomever it might be, has a three-part test. Number one, lend freely. You got to get the money out there, but only to sovereign institutions at a punitive rate. Meaning, yeah, I'll lend you the money, but you got to pay up, and that's the deal. So take all three parts of that. So lend freely at a punitive rate only to sovereign institutions. In 1907, when Pierpont Morgan had the bankers locked in his library at his townhouse in Mary Hill around 35th and Madison, he sent Benjamin Strong, later president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, out with a team to examine the books of all the major banks. And they did triage, and they came back and they broke them into three categories. They said, these banks are solid, they're fine, they're going to survive the crisis. These banks are solvent, but they're illiquid. They've got good assets, but they don't have the cash. There was a third category who were insolvent. They go, these people are going to fail, we can't help them. And what Morgan said, and when he locked them in the room, it wasn't to get them to come up with a plan. He told them the plan. He said, I'm going to lock you in the room until you agree. Yeah, but he did. But and they did by the next morning. I guess they were hungry. But what they did, they said the sound banks will lend money to the solvent but illiquid banks to solve the illiquidity problem, and these banks will fail. So it's not as if no banks failed. A lot of banks failed, but not enough to take down the system. And the solvent but illiquid banks were rescued by the stronger banks, and all those banks continued, and then things got back to normal. So in other words, Pierpont Morgan in 1907 ran the Walter Bagehot playbook to a T. He lent freely at a punitive rate, but only to sovereign institutions. Now, in 1998, the problem with long-term capital is we actually liked our trades. We talked to Warren Buffett and Prince Halloween and a bunch of others. They said, you ought to buy this. But there wasn't enough time. And Wall Street put the money in to solve a liquidity crisis. But guess what? Within a year, Wall Street got all of their money back with a nice profit. In other words, it wasn't a question of insolvency. It was a question of illiquidity. They solved that problem, and we eventually unwound it, and everyone got their money back at a profit. But the Fed didn't do that. We use Pierpont Morgan's playbook. When the Fed gets involved, and I'll use Bernanke in 2008 as an example, but you could also use Jay Powell in 2020. They do the first part. They lend freely. Like the money spigots are wide open, but not at a punitive rate. It's at zero. Yeah. And they lend to the solvent and the insolvent alike. In other words, you can be completely insolvent, as AIG was in 2008, as General Motors was in the fall of 2009, and still get the loan. So the problem is, by not letting anyone fail, what do we signal to investors? We say, buy the dips. Just don't worry. Like, it doesn't matter how many times the stock market goes down 30%. And as it has, 3 times in the last 21 years, it'll always come back. The Fed has your back. So what does that mean? Buy the dips. Goes down, buy the dips. It goes down, buy the dips. And so now you're the Fed. You're like, wait a second, that's not what we intended, but that's what you have. When you don't let people fail, the message is nobody's going to fail, and therefore you might as well keep buying them. And then you get bubbles that just spin out of control. So Walter Bagehot laid down the ground rules. Pierpont Morgan ran the playbook in 1907 to a T. We ran it again in 1998. It worked fine. It was not a Fed bailout. That was a Wall Street bailout. But unfortunately, when the Fed's involved or other central banks, the ECB, they lend to everybody and no one fails. And the signal to investors is the wrong signal, which is just keep buying it because no one's going to crash. It's easy to say the Fed things screwed up because they always do. So will they do it again? Yes. And I'll tell you exactly how. As of now, again, things can change, but as of now, the Fed is signaling as loudly as they can that they're going to start the taper in November. Jay Powell more or less said that at Jackson Hole. He said that in some congressional testimony. He gives himself an out, but they believe in signaling. It's not, you don't need a decoder ring to figure out what the Fed's going to do. They actually kind of tell you in if not quite in so many words, you don't need an advanced degree to figure out what they're saying. So we're going to start the taper. Well, taper is a form of tightening. And a lot of people say, well, no, because they're not raising rates yet. And they're still buying government securities. They're still printing money. They're just not printing as much as they did before. That's what tapering is. They're going to reduce their asset purchases. Sorry. Everything happens at the margin. In a dynamic system, that's what capital markets are. The margin is what counts. And if you taper, you tighten. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go extreme. They'll probably do the taper, reduce purchases $10, $12 billion a month for 10 straight months, to get $120 billion down to zero. And then it may take another year after that before they raise rates, although I personally don't think they'll get there. But that's their plan. It's like watching the movie in reverse. I mean, first, rates are here. So first they cut them to zero, and then they start QE where they start printing money. Okay, so when they want to undo it, they play the movie backwards. So first they start the taper, which is reducing the money supply, reducing M0, and then they start to raise rates. They did it in excruciatingly slow pace between 2008 and 2018. Then they crashed the stock market. Most remember, the stock market fell 20% almost, very close to 20% between October 1st, 2018 and the Christmas Eve massacre. And then Jay Powell got religion, said, oh, I guess I screwed that up. We better cut rates. And they did. And they've been cutting ever since and printing money ever since. But so take everything I said before about the depression and all the signs that the economy is slowing dramatically, which it is. That would be about the worst time to tighten, and that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to tighten in November, and that might even cause some kind of financial crisis. There's a difference between a financial crisis and a recession. I mean, they're both bad, but you can have one without the other, as we have many times, but they can come together. That might just be enough to set it off.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
Do you want to know one thing about crypto? I made over 3,000% in profit in a few weeks. Fact is, the traditional financial system, the traditional money system makes you poor, not rich. If you want to earn $500,000, $1 million, you have to wait until you're 50, 60, 70 in the traditional financial system, and you probably will still be broke. And you will be old. This is not a sexy combination, as you can imagine. But the question is, how can you start in crypto and make these profits? Where to invest? Where to start? My name is Gunnar and I'm from Germany, as you can hear, and things are a little bit different in Germany. More about that later on. Fact is, there are lots of different cryptocurrencies. It's a gigantic universe where beginners and professionals get easily lost. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are 7 key steps you need to follow to become successful in this market. You have to know them, and if you fail one of them, it's literally impossible to succeed in this market. Just an example, one of the key points is your exchange, and one of the biggest are, for example, Binance and Coinbase. These are trusted and well-established exchanges, but, and this is a big but, you won't find the super profitable coins on those exchanges. The unknown super profitable coins that get gigantic profits are not traded on those kind of exchanges. They are traded on much smaller insider platforms that are barely known. And I can tell you what those super secret exchanges are and why they are so profitable. And another super important thing are the right information sources. The point is, the internet is gigantic. There are hundreds and hundreds of YouTube channels, blogs, pages, and much more. And there are also market makers and influencers. For example, Elon Musk, he is not a crypto guy, but the moment he recommended Dogecoin, it went through the roof, to the moon, so to say. But why did he recommend it? Where did he hear it from? He didn't hear it from newspapers. And believe me, he is listening to someone. But you have to know who, and you have to react before he is reacting. This is really important. And these are only 2 of the 7 steps you have to follow in order to be successful in crypto. And if you want to know all of these steps in much more detail, and if you want to have a comprehensive checklist, here's what you should do. There is a link below this video. Click on this link and you will get the opportunity to subscribe to my channel. Click on the link and you will see a video where I explain the next steps. So see you soon. Click on the link now. I'll see you there.